Elena Vasquez was having the worst week of her life. And that was saying something for a woman who had once been stuck in a broken escape pod for 3 days with nothing but protein paste and her own bad singing to keep her company. Her cargo ship had developed engine trouble near Calindra Station, and the repair crews had told her it would take at least 2 more days before they could get the parts she needed. 2 days of sitting around with nothing to do and very little money to spend, she wandered through the massive station, looking at shops she could not afford and restaurants that charged more for a single meal than she made in a week. Calindra was a wealthy station, a place where diplomats and merchants and important people came to do important business. And Elena was none of those things. She was just a mechanic from Earth, a woman who fixed engines and kept to herself and had never done anything particularly special in her 32 years of life. The Galactic Cultural Exchange Center caught her eye only because someone had put up a sign advertising free snacks for visitors. Elena had learned long ago that free food was never truly free. But her stomach was growling, and her pride was not as strong as her hunger. She walked inside and found herself in a bright, colorful building filled with displays about different alien species and their cultures. There were interactive exhibits and holograms, and all sorts of educational materials designed to help the various species of the galaxy understand each other better. Elena grabbed a handful of something that looked like crackers from a welcome table and started eating as she walked through the building. The food was strange but not terrible, with a slightly sweet taste that reminded her of honey mixed with cardboard. She was reading about the mating rituals of the Kreth X people and trying not to laugh at the illustrations when she heard the screaming. It was not human screaming. It was a mix of sounds that her translator could not quite process. High-pitched whistles and low rumbles and clicking noises that made her teeth hurt. She followed the sounds down a hallway and around a corner until she came to a large room with transparent walls inside. She could see children. At least, she assumed they were children based on their size, though they looked nothing like human kids. There were creatures with tentacles, and creatures with too many legs, and creatures that seemed to be made entirely of floating bubbles. And all of them were gathered around a figure lying on the floor. The figure was an adult alien, a tall being covered in shimmering scales that kept flickering through different colors in a way that seemed wrong and uncontrolled. Elena had seen enough medical emergencies to recognize one when it was happening. She tried to open the door, but it was locked. She could see a panel on the wall that required some kind of identification she did not have. She banged on the transparent wall and shouted, trying to get someone's attention. But the children just stared at her with eyes that were too big and too scared. Security officer came running down the hallway, a creature that looked like a praying mantis wearing a uniform. It scanned the situation and immediately started speaking into a communication device, its mandibles clicking rapidly. Medical emergency in Education Wing 7. The officer said in translated speech that came through Elena's earpiece. Valthuri instructor appears to be experiencing neural cascade failure. We need immediate medical response. The door opened and medical personnel rushed inside, surrounding the fallen instructor and lifting them onto a floating stretcher. Elena watched as they carried the alien away, leaving the room full of frightened children with no one to watch them. She started to walk away. This was not her problem, and she had enough of her own troubles to deal with. But then one of the children made a sound that needed no translation. A small whimpering cry that was the same in any language. Elena stopped. The security officer was speaking into its device again, its tone frustrated and worried. I cannot leave them unattended, it was saying. Protocol 773 requires an adult supervisor for all juvenile groups. I am the only officer in this sector and I have duties that cannot wait. Elena turned around and looked at the room full of alien children. There were 23 of them. She counted quickly and they ranged in size from smaller than her hand to taller than her head. They were all watching her through the transparent wall with expressions she could not read, but feelings she understood perfectly. They were scared and alone, and their teacher was gone. I can stay with them, Elena heard herself say, and she was not sure why the words came out of her mouth. This was definitely not her problem, and she definitely did not know anything about taking care of alien children. Security officer turned to look at her with eyes that reflected the light like mirrors. "You are human," it said, and the statement sounded almost like a question. "Last time I checked," Elena replied, "humans are new to the galactic community. Your species has only been part of the Concord for 12 years. I do not have data on human childcare capabilities," Elena shrugged, a gesture she knew most aliens found confusing. "I used to babysit my neighbor's kids back on Earth. How different can it be?" The security officer made a sound that her translator interpreted as uncertain agreement. It opened the door, and Elena walked inside, suddenly very aware of 23 pairs of alien eyes watching her every move. "Emergency protocols are now in effect," the officer announced. "This human will serve as temporary supervisor until a replacement instructor can be found. The estimated time is 30 standard minutes." The door closed behind Elena with a soft hiss, and she heard the lock engage. The security officer was already walking away, speaking into its device about other emergencies and other problems. Elena looked at the children. They looked back at her. "So," she said, trying to smile in a way that she hoped was friendly and not terrifying, "does anyone want to tell me your names?" No one answered. They just kept staring at her with those big, strange, beautiful eyes. And Elena wondered what exactly she had gotten herself into. She did not know that 3 sectors away, a cargo drone swarm was malfunctioning. She did not know that the station's automated defense systems had failed to detect the problem. She did not know that 17 rogue drones were cutting through walls and floors, heading in a direction that would bring them directly to this room. She did not know that in exactly 14 minutes, her life was going to change forever. All she knew was that 23 scared children needed someone to tell them everything was going to be okay. And right now, she was the only someone available. "All right," Elena said, sitting down on the floor so she would seem less tall and less frightening. "Let me tell you about where I come from. There is a planet called Earth, and it is mostly covered in water. And humans like me have lived there for a very long time. One of the smaller creatures, something that looked like a purple starfish with too many points, moved a little closer to listen. Elena kept talking, her voice calm and steady, filling the silence with stories about blue oceans and green forests in a small apartment in Mexico City where she had grown up listening to her grandmother tell tales about ancient gods and brave heroes. She had no idea that she was about to become both. The lights went out without warning, and for a moment, Elena could see nothing but darkness. Then the emergency lights came on, bathing everything in a red glow that made the room look like something from a nightmare. The children started to panic. Elena had seen fear before, but she had never seen anything like this. The creatures with bioluminescent skin began flashing in rapid, chaotic patterns that hurt her eyes. Something released a cloud of chemicals that smelled like burning metal and made her throat close up. The tall ones with the multiple limbs started making sounds at frequencies that vibrated through her skull like a drill. She could not understand most of what they were saying, but she did not need to. Fear was fear, no matter what language it spoke. "Hey!" Elena shouted over the noise, but no one was listening. The children were lost in their own terror, each species reacting in its own instinctive way to danger they could sense. But not so. Elena did the only thing she could think of. She started to sing. It was a lullaby her grandmother used to sing to her, an old Mexican song about the moon watching over sleeping children. Elena could not carry a tune to save her life, and she had forgotten half the words. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the sound to human ears. It was just a rough, off-key song. But to the aliens in that room, it was something else entirely. It was a low-frequency vibration that resonated in their bones and their shells and their sensory organs. A sound that their instincts recognized as ancient and powerful, and dangerous. The room went quiet when E3. Children stopped their panic and turned to look at Elena with expressions that mixed fear with something new, something like fascination. They had never heard anything like her voice before. This strange predator hum that seemed to bypass their higher brains and speak directly to the scared animal parts of their minds. "Good," Elena said softly, still holding on to that singing tone even as she spoke. "That is good. We are going to be okay. I need everyone to stay calm and stay together." An alarm started blaring somewhere in the distance, and Elena could hear the station's automated voice announcing something about a security breach and evacuation protocols. She tried the door, but it was still locked, and the emergency panel was flashing red in a way that did not look good. Then she heard it. A sound like metal cutting through metal. Coming from somewhere above them, she looked up and saw the ceiling starting to bulge inward. Something was on the other side, something that was trying to get through. "Everyone get behind me," Elena said, and her voice had changed. It was no longer soft or soothing. It was hard and flat and carried an authority that made the children obey without question. They scrambled behind her, clustering together in a frightened mass of tentacles and limbs and floating bodies. And Elena grabbed the first thing she could find that might serve as weapons. A fire extinguisher from the wall and a broken piece of desk that had a sharp edge. The ceiling exploded. Drones poured through the opening like angry insects. Silver machines about the size of her head with spinning blades and glowing red sensors. Elena had seen cargo drones before, helpful machines that moved boxes and packages around stations and ships. But these were different. These were broken. Their programming corrupted by some malfunction that had turned them from tools into threats. Their blades spun at killing speed and their sensors locked onto the largest heat signatures in the room. The children. Elena did not think. Thinking was too slow for what needed to happen next. Her body simply moved, driven by something older than thought. Something that humans had carried in their blood since the days when they hunted on the savannas of Earth. She swung the fire extinguisher and caught the first drone right in its sensor array, sending it spinning into the wall where it shattered into pieces. She sprayed the next three with foam, clogging their intake vents and sending them crashing to the floor. She used the desk piece like a club, like a sword, like an extension of her own arm, batting drones out of the air and crushing them against surfaces. The children watched in frozen silence as the human became something they had never seen before. Her pupils dilated until her eyes looked almost black. Her breathing became deep and rhythmic. Her skin flushed with blood as her body temperature rose with the effort of combat. She did not fight like the security forces they had seen in training videos, with careful tactics and coordinated movements. She fought like a wild animal, all instinct and aggression, and a terrifying refusal to stop moving, even when the drones cut her arms and her face and her shoulders. "Door," Elena shouted between swings. "Is there another door? An emergency exit? Anything?" One of the children, a creature with a shell like a turtle and eyes on stalks, pointed a trembling limb toward the back of the room. "Emergency shelter," it said in a voice that squeaked with terror. "Behind the wall panel. Code is 7-7-7-7." Elena grabbed a drone out of the air and threw it into two others, then used a momentary break to herd the children toward the back wall. She found the panel and punched in the code, and a section of wall slid open to reveal a small reinforced room designed exactly for emergencies like this. "Everyone inside," she commanded. "Now. Move. Go, go, go." The children scrambled into the shelter, squeezing past each other in their desperation to reach safety. Elena stood at the entrance, blocking the doorway with her body, fighting off the drones that kept coming and coming and coming. She lost count of how many she destroyed. Her arms burned with exhaustion, and her hands were slick with her own blood, but she did not stop. She could not stop. Behind her were children, and something in her DNA would not let her abandon them. The last drone fell at her feet, just as she heard footsteps pounding down the hallway outside. "Station security," a voice shouted. "We are breaching the door." Elena stayed in the doorway of the shelter, her makeshift weapons still raised, her body positioned between the children and any threat that might come through that door. She did not know if the security forces were real or if this was some kind of trick. She only knew that nothing was getting to those kids while she could still stand. The door exploded open and armored figures rushed in, their weapons raised. They stopped when they saw her. This small human woman covered in blood and surrounded by drone wreckage, standing guard over 23 alien children with nothing but a fire extinguisher and a broken piece of furniture. "What?" one of the officers said. "What happened here?" Elena lowered her weapons slowly, her legs shaking with exhaustion. "They are all safe," she said. And then she sat down on the floor because her body simply could not stand anymore. The children poured out of the shelter and surrounded her, pressing close to her battered body with their tentacles and limbs in soft floating forms. The smallest one, the purple starfish, climbed into her lap and wrapped itself around her arm. "Warm voice," it said in a tiny, odd whisper. Warm voice, who stands between. Elena did not understand what that meant, but she was too tired to ask. She just held on to the little creature and let herself breathe while the security officer stared at her like she had grown a second head. She had no idea that the classroom cameras had recorded everything. She had no idea that the footage was already spreading across the station's network. She had no idea that by tomorrow, the entire galaxy would know her name. Elena woke up in a medical bay with bandages on her arms and a headache that felt like someone had used her skull for a drum. A doctor with 4 arms and skin like polished wood was checking her vital signs on a floating display. "You are awake," the doctor said, and there was something strange in its voice, something that sounded almost like nervousness. "How do you feel?" "Like I got into a fight with a garbage disposal," Elena replied. "How are the kids? Are they okay?" The doctor's 4 hands stopped moving, and it looked at her with an expression she could not read. "The children are unharmed. You protected them. All 23 of them. Not a single injury among them." Elena let out a breath she did not know she had been holding. That was all that mattered. The kids were safe. Everything else was just details. "Good," she said. "When can I get out of here? I still need to fix my ship." The doctor made a sound that her translator interpreted as uncomfortable laughter. "I do not think you understand what has happened. Perhaps you should see this." It reached over and activated a screen on the wall, and Elena saw herself. The footage was from the classroom cameras, showing everything that had happened in sharp, clear detail. She watched herself sing to the panicking children, watched herself grab weapons and position her body between the little ones and danger, watched herself fight like a woman. Possessed. The video had been viewed over 2 billion times. In the last 8 hours, Elena stared at the screen with her mouth hanging open as the doctor explained what had been happening while she slept. The footage had leaked within minutes of the incident, spreading across galactic networks faster than any news story in recorded history. Every major species was talking about it, analyzing it, debating what it meant. "They are calling you the human," the doctor said, "as if you are the only one that matters." Elena did not know what to say. She was just a mechanic. She had done what anyone would do in that situation. There was nothing special about protecting children from danger. It was just basic decency, but the galaxy did not see it that way. Over the next few days, Elena learned how the other species viewed what she had done. She watched expert panels and retranslated articles and received messages from scientists and philosophers who wanted to study her or interview her or just understand how she had done what she did. The Velthari, the species of the children's teacher, released a detailed analysis of her fighting style. They noted how she had predicted drone movements before they happened, how her eyes tracked multiple targets simultaneously, how she had adapted her tactics in real time to deal with new threats. They called it apex predator behavior and said it explained many things about humanity that had previously confused them. The Krethiks, a species known for their cold logic and rational thinking, published a paper about her body temperature. They found it deeply disturbing that human internal heat increased during combat, that her blood flowed faster and her muscles worked harder when she was fighting. Most species became slower and weaker under stress, but humans became more dangerous. The Moathaki, a race of gentle giants who communicated through colors and light, expressed horror and fascination at her voice. They had never encountered a species that could produce such low-frequency sounds, vibrations that seemed to reach into the primitive parts of alien brains and trigger ancient fear responses. They compared her singing to the hunting calls of extinct mega-predators from their home world. But what disturbed the galaxy most was not her fighting or her body or her voice. It was the simple fact that she had not run away. Humans have multiple escape routes available in any situation. A famous military analyst said in an interview that Elena watched with growing discomfort. Their ancestors survived by knowing when to fight and when to flee. They are not stupid creatures. They understand danger perfectly well. But this human, the analyst continued, this human had every opportunity to save herself. The drones were focused on the children. She could have hidden in the emergency shelter alone. She could have sacrificed the young ones to save her own life. It would have been the logical choice. Instead, she chose to stay. She chose to bleed. She chose to stand between death and children she had known for less than 30 minutes. And she did not even hesitate. Elena turned off the screen and sat in silence for a long time. She did not understand why everyone was making such a big deal out of this. Of course she had stayed. Of course she had fought. What else was she supposed to do? Leaving those children to die had never even occurred to her as an option. But apparently, for most species in the galaxy, it would have been the obvious choice. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts, and she opened it to find a small delegation of Velthari waiting outside. They were adults, their scales shimmering with colors that her translator identified as respect and gratitude and a hint of fear. "We are the parents," one of them said. "We have come to thank you for saving our children." Elena invited them in, and they gave her gifts. Small tokens from their culture that were apparently very valuable and meaningful. She accepted them graciously, even though she had no idea what most of them were. "We have a question," one of the parents said before they left. "A question that we must ask, even though we are afraid of the answer." "Okay," Elena said. "Why did you do it? Why did you risk your life for children of another species? Children you had never met before. Children who are not even the same kind of creature as you." Elena thought about the question for a moment, trying to find words that would make sense to beings who apparently found her actions incomprehensible because they were scared. She finally said, "Because they were little and helpless and they needed someone to protect them. Because that is what you do when you are the adult in the room and children are in danger. You do not run away. You stand between them and whatever is trying to hurt them. Even if it kills you?" The parent asked. Elena shrugged. "Even if it kills you." The Velthari exchanged glances that rippled with colors Elena could not interpret. And then they bowed low and left without another word. Later, Elena would learn that her answer had been translated and broadcast across the galaxy. She would learn that it had sparked debates in academic institutions and military academies and government chambers. She would learn that philosophers were writing entire books about what she had said and what it meant for humanity's place in the galactic community. But in that moment, sitting alone in her borrowed room on Kalindra Station, Elena just wanted to go home and fix engines and forget that any of this had ever happened. She had no idea that forgetting was no longer an option. The galaxy had seen what humans could be, and it was never going the same way again. Elena tried to go back to her normal life, but her normal life did not seem to exist anymore. Her ship was fixed and ready to fly, but she could not go anywhere without being recognized. Aliens she had never met would stop her in corridors and stare at her with expressions that ranged from admiration to terror. Some asked for pictures. Some asked for autographs. Some just wanted to touch her. As if physical contact with the human would give them some kind of protection, she hated all of it. "I am just a mechanic," she told the 100th reporter who tried to interview her. "I fix engines. I am not special. I am not a hero. I just did what anyone would do," but the galaxy was not listening. The galaxy had already decided what she was, and nothing she said could change it. The stories started getting bigger and stranger as they spread from system to system. She had destroyed 17 drones, but the story said 50 or 100 or 200. She had used a fire extinguisher and a piece of desk, but the story said she had fought with her bare hands, tearing machines apart with nothing but human fury. One version claimed she had eaten a drone to frighten the others into retreating. She had not eaten a drone. She wanted to make that very clear to everyone. The very idea was ridiculous and also probably bad for your teeth, but the legends kept growing regardless of what she wanted. 3 months after the incident, Elena finally got her ship cleared for departure and began making her way back toward Earth. She needed cargo jobs to pay for fuel and supplies, so she stopped at various stations along the way. Doing the same work she had always done, the work had changed at her first stop. She picked up a routine cargo shipment that was supposed to go to a mining colony in the outer systems. Halfway through the journey, her ship was intercepted by pirates. Elena sat at her controls, watching the pirate vessel approach on her scanner, and felt a cold knot of fear in her stomach. She had no weapons. She had no crew. She had nothing but a cargo hold full of machine parts and a very strong desire not to die in the emptiness of space. Her communication screen flickered on, showing the face of the pirate captain. It was a member of a species she did not recognize, with a face that was mostly teeth and eyes that gleamed with predatory intelligence. "Human cargo ship," the captain growled. "Prepare to be boarded. Resist and you will be destroyed." Elena opened her mouth to respond, to beg or bargain or do whatever it took to survive. But before she could speak, someone in the background of the pirate bridge shouted something. "Captain! Captain, wait! Look at the registration on that ship." The pirate captain turned away from the screen, and Elena could hear frantic conversation happening in the background. Words like the human and Kalindra station and predator-class threat drifted through her speakers. When the captain turned back to the screen, its expression had changed completely. The predatory gleam was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "We apologize for the misunderstanding," the captain said in a voice that had lost all of its threat. "Please continue on your way. We will not trouble you. In fact, please accept this gift as a token of our respect." The pirates sent over a crate of valuable goods and flew away at top speed. Elena sat in her pilot's seat for a long time, staring at the empty space where the pirate ship had been, trying to understand what had just happened. This was not the last team. A Dominion warlord invited her to join his elite guard. 3 separate species offered her citizenship and all the benefits that came with it. 2 governments proposed marriage alliances that would have given her power and wealth beyond anything she could imagine. One small religious cult declared her a minor deity and started building shrines in her honor. She said no to all of them. She just wanted to fix engines. Why would nobody let her fix engines in peace? The worst part was the diplomatic incident. Elena had stopped at a station for fuel when she was grabbed by a group of very nervous-looking officials and dragged to a conference room where the most important beings in the sector were having what appeared to be a very loud argument. What is happening? Elena demanded. Why am I here? I have not done anything wrong. We know, one of the officials said. We need your help. The Concord Summit has been going on for 3 days, and no one can agree on anything. Tensions are rising. There are fears that this could lead to war between the factions. And what am I supposed to do about it? I am a mechanic. I do not know anything about politics. The official looked at her with an expression that suggested she was missing something obvious. You are the human. Your presence alone will change the dynamic. Please, just go in there and say something. Before Elena could protest, she was pushed through a door into a room full of arguing ambassadors. The noise was incredible, with dozens of species shouting at each other in languages her translator could barely keep up with. Elena stood there for a moment, overwhelmed and confused and increasingly angry. She had been having a perfectly nice day before all of this. She had been planning to fix a cooling system and maybe get some decent food for once. She did not ask to be dragged into galactic politics. Hey, she shouted, but no one heard her. Hey! She shouted again, louder this time, and slammed her hand down on the nearest table, hard enough to make the furniture shake. The room went silent. Every alien eye turned to look at her. She could see fear and surprise and curiosity in their expressions, and something that looked like respect. I do not know what this is about, Elena said, her voice hard and flat in the way it had been when she was fighting drones. But you are all being ridiculous. Figure it out or I am leaving. Then she turned and walked out of the room. The summit reached a peace agreement in 6 hours. 3 species later claimed it was because they were afraid of what Elena would do if they did not. One ambassador said that the way she had slammed the table reminded him of a predator marking its territory. Another said her voice had triggered an involuntary fear response that made continuing the argument seem unwise. Elena learned about all of this from news reports while she was fixing a broken fuel injector on her ship. She read the analysis of her diplomatic intervention and shook her head in disbelief. I just told them to stop being stupid, she muttered to herself. How is that a diplomatic intervention? But the galaxy had made up its mind. Elena was not just a human anymore. She was a force to be respected and feared. She was proof that humanity was something new and dangerous and wonderful in the galactic community, and no matter how many times she insisted that she was just a mechanic from Earth, no one believed her. The legend had grown too big for the truth to matter anymore. 5 years had passed since the incident on Calindra Station, and Elena Vasquez stood on the balcony of a building she never thought she would see. Let alone work in the Earth Galactic Embassy was humanity's first permanent diplomatic presence in the heart of the galactic community. It floated in orbit around the Concord's capital world, a gleaming structure of glass and metal that received visitors from 100 different species every single day, and Elena was its director. She still was not entirely sure how that had happened. One day she had been fixing engines and dodging reporters, and then there had been meetings and offers and people explaining to her that humanity needed a face the galaxy respected, a symbol that other species could point to and say, this is what humans are like. She had tried to explain that she was the worst possible choice. She had no diplomatic training. She had no political experience. She had barely finished high school before running away to work on starships. There were thousands of humans who would be better at this job than she was, but the galaxy did not want those humans. The galaxy wanted the human. The galaxy wanted warm voice who stands between. So here she was, wearing clothes that cost more than her old ship, standing in an office bigger than her childhood apartment, waiting for a delegation of young Velthori diplomats who had requested an audience with her specifically. The door opened, and 3 young aliens walked in, their scales shimmering with colors that Elena's translator identified as nervous excitement. They were barely adults by their species standards, fresh from their training academies and eager to prove themselves. Elena smiled at them, and she noticed one of them flinch slightly at the sight of her teeth. 5 years of diplomatic training had not entirely eliminated the fact that most aliens found human expressions unsettling. "Welcome," she said, keeping her voice soft and warm. "Please, make yourselves comfortable. There is no need to be nervous. I do not bite." She paused and added, "Despite what some of the stories say, the young Velthori relaxed a little at her humor." They took seats on the cushions she had arranged for them, and Elena sat down across from them in a way that made her seem smaller and less threatening. "We are honored to meet you," the tallest one said in a voice that trembled slightly. "We have studied your actions extensively in our diplomatic training. The Kalindra incident is required material for all Velthori students." "Is it?" Elena said, and she could not quite keep the weariness out of her voice. "I hope they teach the accurate version and not the one where I ate a drone." The Velthori exchanged glances, their scales flickering with amusement. "They teach both versions," the smallest one said. "The accurate one in history class and the legendary one in cultural studies." Elena laughed, and she was pleased to see that the young aliens did not flinch at the sound. Either they had been trained to expect it, or humanity's presence in the galaxy had become normal enough that a human laugh was no longer terrifying. "I have a confession to make," she said. "I did not want this job. I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to fix engines and mind my own business. But the galaxy had other plans for me." "Why did you accept it then?" One of the young diplomats asked Elena, thought about the question for a moment, looking out the window at the ships coming and going from the station. Velthori ships and Krethic ships and Malthaki ships and dozens of others. All of them passing through the same space. All of them part of the same community. "Because I realized something," she finally said. "I realized that what happened on Kalindra Station was not really about me. It was about what I represented. It was proof that humans will stand between danger and innocent creatures, even when those creatures are strangers. Even when running away would be easier." She turned back to face them, and I realized that if I had that kind of power, the power to change how the galaxy sees my species, then I had a responsibility to use it well. Not for myself, but for all the humans who would come after me. For all the relationships between our species that had not been built yet. The smallest Velthori was staring at her with an intensity that seemed different from the others. Elena looked more closely and noticed something familiar about the pattern of scales on its face. Something that triggered a memory she could not quite place. "Is there something you want to say?" Elena asked gently. The young alien stood up, its scales rippling through colors that her translator could not fully interpret. There was nervousness there, but also determination, and something that looked like deep emotion. "You do not recognize me," it said, "but I recognize you. I will always recognize you. You are a warm voice who stands between, and you saved my life when I was small and scared and certain I was going to die." Elena's breath caught in her throat. She looked at the young Velthori again, really looked, and suddenly she could see it. The same pattern of scales, now larger and darker with maturity. The same eyes that had looked up at her with terror and wonder while she sang a lullaby in a language no one understood. "The classroom," Elena whispered. "You were there. You were one of the children." "I was the smallest," the young Velthori said. "I was so scared that I could not move. I thought the drones were going to hurt me, and no one would help. And then you came. You came, and you stood between us and death. And you never stopped standing until it was over. Elena rose from her seat, and she did not care that diplomats were supposed to maintain professional distance. She did not care that showing emotion was considered a sign of weakness in galactic politics. She crossed the space between them and opened her arms. "Come here," she said. The young Valkyrie hesitated for only a moment before rushing forward and wrapping itself around her in a tight embrace. Its scales were cool against her skin, and she could feel it trembling with emotion. "I became a diplomat because of you," it said into her shoulder. "I wanted to build bridges between species the way you did. I wanted to protect people the way you protected us. You are the reason I am here." Elena held the young alien close and felt tears running down her face. She did not try to hide them. Let the galaxy see. Let them know that humans cried when they were happy, that their emotions ran deep and strong, that the creatures they had decided to fear were also capable of tenderness and joy. "I am so proud of you," she said. "I am so proud of who you have become." The other young diplomats watched in silence, their scales shifting through colors of wonder and respect. Somewhere, an aide was probably recording this moment for the historical archives. Somewhere, analysts would study it and try to understand what it meant for galactic relations. But Elena did not care about any of that. She was just a woman holding on to someone she had once protected. Someone who had grown up and come back to find her. Someone who proved that what she had done that day had mattered later. A watching ambassador would send a report back to their government. It would contain a single observation that would become famous across the galaxy. Humans, apex predators, will adopt anything. Approach with caution and snacks, and somewhere in the embassy, Elena Vasquez, the human, the most feared and famous human in the galaxy, laughed until her sides hurt and thought that maybe, just maybe, this had all been worth it after all.